So welcome everybody. I'm Walter Mulberry. I'm the volunteer coordinator for the invasives group. And I met Sara earlier this year when she took us for a lovely walk, sort of between Tacoma Park and Silver Spring, looking for invasives. We were looking for one invasive in particular, which we did not find, but there were so many others. So I had heard about the PRISM project, and I guess I'm on a mailing list. And she was describing as a grant-funded position that apparently has different regions, because I think I've seen maybe at Cornell and some other places. So she's going to tell us about that. And I'll let her tell you about her background a bit. And I'm particularly interested in what resources beyond Sara's enthusiasm for this, once we decide, or once she decides, wow, this is the 3-alarm fire, are there resources out there other than our pulling and cutting or whatever else? Does it have to be a 5-alarm fire? Does it have to be a 9-alarm fire, or are there resources? Or anyway, but without further ado, so I'll give you Sara, who can share her screen and take it away.
All right, you should be seeing the presentation now.
Yes.
Excellent, we're doing good. So this evening, I'm going to talk with you about early detection and rapid response. So this is a fairly new approach to invasives management. Basically, we're trying to get out ahead of the curve. And the reason for that, as you see in the photograph at the right, is that we keep winding up in this condition on the right. English ivy all over the ground, pulling the trees down. Most of the shrubs are shrub honeysuckles, lesser celandine everywhere. And I think we know this isn't the best approach. So we need to stop with this approach. It's not working. We need to do something else. And I think Walter mentioned a really important part of what that something else is. We need more resources. There's no two ways about it. I think early detection and rapid response can also help us get those resources. So Walter, I failed to mention that during the presentation. Please ask me about it at the end of the presentation. There are 3 main topics. One is the invasion curve. I was out hiking with Walter and a couple of other great people from the Friends of Sligo Creek, and they kept asking questions, and I was like, the answer is on the invasion curve. The answer is, oh, it's all about the invasion curve. So that's why I'm here tonight. We're going to talk about the invasion curve. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about how you can help with that by reporting the things that you see. And because we're all kind of plant people, let's just talk about 4 plants, right? They're very interesting, I promise. So this is it. This is the invasion curve. And it's a graph of the area infested as a function of time. So the area infested, as more and more area gets infested, the more damage is done to the ecosystem. The more time it's going to take us to clean it up, or the more money it's going to take to clean it up. And then on the x-axis, we have time. And this x-axis is a little weird because I put 0 there off to the left, but it's not all the way off to the left like it usually is on graphs. And that's because on this graph, 0 is the very most important time. It's the time when a new species gets introduced. And the single most effective way to deal with an invasive species is to not introduce it in the first place, right? I mean, come on. An ounce of prevention, right? Is there a truer saying than an ounce of prevention? But we do, prevention fails sometimes, doesn't it? So we do wind up introducing things And what usually happens at first is that there will be just a few populations in natural areas, and they'll be in a fairly small area. So an example of that would be if there were 3 alien plants in the corner of a schoolyard somewhere in one county. So that's the typical for what the beginning of this process, the invasion process looks like. And then there's this period of very slow growth of that population, and we call that the lag time. And the period of slow growth is indicated by this sort of, its curve is increasing, but it's almost flat. And that is the typical thing that happens. It doesn't always work that way. We've had a few species that just sort of skyrocket right out the gate. They bolt right out the gate. But typically there's a lag period of many decades and even centuries sometimes before we get into this yellow zone where there's rapid growth. And what's happening there is that the new species is adapting to its environment, and it's getting closer to other individuals in its species that it can cross-pollinate with. Now, I'm going to use plant terms like cross-pollinate because mostly I deal with plants, but the exact same curve applies to animals and diseases and everything. So as the rate of increase in the population begins to go up like this, it becomes much more difficult to put the genie back in the bottle. So if we mess up and we fail to prevent the introduction, our next best shot is this green zone before the rate of increase becomes rapid. Unfortunately, we don't usually detect the new thing until we're already leaving the green zone. So like I said, it's 3 plants in the corner of one schoolyard in one county, and what are the chances somebody's going to spot it? And then it spreads and it spreads, and usually before it spreads way too far, some sort of plant nerd somewhere will see it. But once they see it, then the conventional approach, the approach that we've had historically the last few decades, is that plant nerd is going to collect specimens, deposit them in a bunch of herbariums, write an article, send the article into a journal. The journal editor is going to write the guy back and say, your article sucks, you have to rewrite it. And then he's going to rewrite it and submit it again and pay $1,000 in page fees. And like 2 or 3 years after this person saw the thing in the field, they'll get to publish a small article in a journal that nobody reads, right? And so there's also a lag time in between first detection and public awareness. Even once it's in the journal that only geeks read, then the geeks have to make other people who are interested in plants aware of it. And then those people have to talk to their families. There have to be newsletters. There have to be classes. This is years. These events are years and years and years apart before you get any general public awareness. So we can't take action. We can't take any meaningful action until we have public awareness. So in 2017, the National Invasive Species Council was looking at this situation, and they said, what we need is a citizen science project, because with a citizen science project, we can speed up detection. Instead of just a few geeks out there in the schoolyard, you will have tens of thousands of people who are just like out there clicking pictures of things. And citizen science also helps to improve public awareness, because it engages people in a way an obscure deposit in an herbarium does not. So citizen science can help us move these two critical events to the left, where maybe we could catch things before they get way out of hand. So the program that was envisioned by the National Invasive Species Council is called Invader Detectives. And this is a group of invader detectives in Arlington County looking at incised fumewort. Walter, that's what we were out looking for on our hike, incised fumewort, and I'm so happy we didn't find it. So how you can help with this is actually fun. It's fairly simple. You get an app for your phone. It's called iNaturalist. And you can use iNaturalist to go out and observe any kind of life that amuses you. You know, you like native wildflowers, go observe them. Just take pictures. You click a button. It's right here at the bottom of the phone screen. And like within a minute, that report is on the internet where anyone in the world can use that information. So you go out, you look for the species, you make the report, and that makes a record of your observation that will be around for a very long time. So the Invader Detectives program, we're the pilot project. The National Invasive Species Council wants to do this nationwide. We're the pilot project. And currently we are tracking 89 species. And if you would like to see that actually happening in real time, this is our project page. It's on the iNaturalist website. And a project page has a little bit of information up here in the top. And then it has a map of all the observations. So right now we have over 20,000 observations of this 89 species. So it's way better than like one guy out in a schoolyard now, right? And across the bottom of the page, you can actually see observations coming in from the field in real time. I love that. I mean, I don't actually need that, but I just love that. I feel like I'm sitting here alone with my computer, right? And suddenly that little thing moves. I feel like connected to that person out in the field. We're both working on the same thing. It's really cool. All right, so that was the invasion curve. And actually that was also reporting. So let's look at some examples. This was the thing that blew up my schedule. On the evening of June 6th, I was in DC on 16th Street, and I started seeing this grass everywhere. And someone had mentioned to me a really bad invasive grass that, and it's bad because the seeds break off and they get into animals, and they get in the animals, they'll get in their eyes, they'll go in their ears, they'll puncture the skin, they'll go through the skin, they go in through the genitals. And the way the barb on the seed is that it will burrow. As the animal moves, this seed will burrow deeper and deeper into the animal. I don't even like saying this. And it often causes an infection. And for a long time, vets didn't know what was causing these infections, especially it hits dogs especially hard. We don't know what wildlife may be dying from it. But it's really hard on dogs. And it's been a thing in the Western United States. So most of us on the East Coast aren't familiar with it. But there was this guy who lived in DC and he was from California. He was like, you guys have this grass here. I saw this grass. And then we couldn't find it. So for 2 years, I've been looking for this grass. And all of a sudden, boom, there it is. And I had to key it out, which those of you who keyed out grasses know that takes a little time to be sure you know what you're talking about. And I sent out preliminary notifications to the DC Department of Public Works because this is like a noxious weed and maybe a public health risk. And certainly if you like your dog, you know, it's not good. And then a preliminary notification to the National Park Service, because Rock Creek Park is literally right across the street from this. So that's early detection and rapid response. You're working with a citizen, you're following up on it. And when you have information, you share it with the land managers. You know how many years that took? 2 days. That's early detection. We're still working on the rapid response. We haven't figured out exactly exactly how we're going to respond to this, because this thing is actually pretty big. So stay tuned. The grass is called Hare Barley, and there's a close-up look at it. And it'll remind you, like if you know what wheat looks like, or if you know what rye looks like, this is a relative. So it's going to remind you of that. The thing is, we do have, and it's short, it's much shorter than they are. This is usually only like a foot tall. It can get a little taller. The thing is, unless you're like into grass ID, like for fun, which I actually recommend, it's kind of like doing crossword puzzles, it's fun. But unless you're actually into that sort of thing, I would just encourage you to report every short thing that looks like wheat and not worry, because you're either reporting one thing or another, and it's all great information. And we will be tracking that through the website. If you report this thing, then I'm going to make sure that whatever land managers need to know, we're going to find out, right? Now, with that in mind, if you are reporting any grass, not just this one, if you're reporting any grass, close-up pictures are super, super helpful. And the places to take a close-up picture, take one right where the leaf blade meets the stem. There's all these little bits of tissue right there that do all different kinds of things, and they're very interesting when you're trying to figure out what species of grass it is. Take a nice close-up picture of the head on the grass. And you can force the camera to focus by holding the part in your hand. Now, as you can see, this looks like wheat. And the interesting thing that's happening here, and actually the diagnostic thing, is that as individual seeds ripen, they break off. And those are the seeds that are burrowing into the animals. And here's another close-up of some of the individual seeds that have broken off.
Wow.
I know, right? So hopefully we can come up with some resources to help address that. So I told you these reports, they come into our webpage. And this particular page, I have set the filter so that we're only looking at Hare barley. And so you can see the red points on the map. Those are the Hare barley observations we have so far. Notice that they're pretty much all inside DC. There are only 9 of them. 8 different people, though. It's not like there's one geek out there doing this, right? It's 8 different people. Without all 8 people, and I haven't even added mine. Mine will be number 10. Without these 8 people, we wouldn't know about these populations. So it just blows my mind. This is awesome. And maybe we can do something. Okay, so the next species I wanted to tell you about is narrow leaf bittercress, and it's moving in from the north. And that's just because wherever it came from, it arrived in the north first. But what the people up north are telling us is that this is the new garlic mustard, only it's a little bit harder to get rid of than garlic mustard is. Like garlic mustard, it's in the mustard family. It is a biennial, and it has a first-year rosette. So right now you're looking at the first-year rosette, which is kind of pretty. And here we have a photo of a first-year infestation. And even the first-year infestation is kind of pretty, looks kind of nice. Then in the second year, the plant will bolt. So if you've ever grown lettuce, or I think there's a couple of other vegetables that the first year they're a rosette like that, or in the early spring there'll be a rosette like that, and then they suddenly send up a stem and they're going to flower and make their seeds, and then they die. So that's what most of the mustards do, actually. And this one is no exception. So here is a bolting specimen of narrow leaf bittercress. And the way to identify this one, and notice I'm not really talking about management today because I'm more focusing on the early detection. Early detection enables the rapid response. But here's a close-up of one of the leaves on the stem. So if you were to pick off one of the leaves on that bolting plant, it would look like this. And it looks different from other mustards that we have around here, because it's a stem leaf and it has more than 7 pairs of leaflets. And those leaflets end in a point. They come to a pretty sharp point. They're not, rounded. So that's another one to keep your eye out for. So far, we only have, I can't quite see the whole screen, but I think it was something like 9 observations. 1 observation for each red dot on the map. And, you think about that. We should be able, maybe not right away, but you could take this map and present it to organizations that provide financial resources. And you could say, we need money to do something. And the reason we need the money to do something is because this plant is showing up. And in fact, you could take this map, this is the 2023 map, and compare it to the 2022 map and the 2021 map, and you could prove quantitatively that if they give you the money this year, it's going to be less money this year than it's going to be when you come back in 2024 and say, we still need some money to address this issue. So these maps can be used for a lot of different really cool things. All right, I'm going to show you 4 species. This is the 3rd one. This is autumn fern. And this is a tricky one because it's a fern and most people are just like, they're very happy if they could tell the thing was a fern at all, much less which one it was. But it's a lovely fern. It is used for landscaping. One of the reasons it is used for landscaping is that it's evergreen. And so that's a really helpful, we don't have a whole lot of native evergreen ferns. And of the ones we do have, there's only one that looks a little bit like this one. And if you look at a frond, you look right here at the bottommost, innermost subleaflet. They're called pinnules. The bottommost, innermost subleaflet where this red arrow is pointing, it is shorter, much shorter than the subleaflet next to it. And that's a really quantitative thing that you can see. You can see it whether it's a reproductive frond or a sterile frond. So that's how you tell it from any of the native ferns. It's evergreen and it has that short pinnule. There are a couple of other really distinctive things about it. One is it's the only fern that I know of where you can see the fruit dots, the fruiting structures, those little circles that are on the back of some fern fronds. You can actually see them from the top side of the fern. It's like Martha Stewart embossed this fern for us, so it would look nice. And it does. It looks pretty nice. It also in the spring tends to have a little pinkish or brick tinge to the new fronds. And then if you look all the way down at the bottom of the leaf where the stem comes up out of the ground, you'll see these really dark, almost black scales, abundant black scales, and that's distinctive too. So the thing about this is, in our area right now, it is not establishing monocultures. It has done that in other areas. It's just arriving in our area, and right now it tends to be one fern off by itself or a handful of ferns spread out in an area. And that's what we're seeing so far. But we are seeing them very, very far away from any yard that has autumn ferns in it. And we are also seeing more and more people put autumn ferns in their yard. So this is just increasing in popularity right now. Here's our map. So we're a little bit further along the early detection, right? We're a little further along that invasion curve than we were with the first two species I showed you. We already have 81 observations of this in our natural areas. And I'm just curious, how many of you already know about Trappa? Could you like raise your hands, and maybe Walter could tell me like if half of you raised your hands? How many of you know about the Trappa? Oh, okay, it's showing me. That's nice. 3 of us. Only 3 of us know about the Trappa. So this is an annual floating plant. It forms these rather attractive rosettes. Never seen a leaf like that anywhere else. And it has these seeds that have very sharp spines on them, very painful, does quite a bit of damage, and it'll go through, I'm told it will go through bicycle tires. I wore, you know, those little neoprene boots you wear with your snorkeling outfit. I wore those once to go do a Trappa removal. That was a really, really bad idea because this went right through that. Very painful too. And this is why it's so painful. You see the photograph on the left? That's a close-up of one of those barbs. And so that goes into your skin. And that hurts. And so then you pull it out of your skin. And that hurts too. So it's not a trivial little, you know, it's much worse than being stabbed by multiflora rose. Let's put it that way, which is bad enough. The other things that are bad about this plant, it's investing waters up to 15 feet deep that are slow moving, and it covers them completely. As you can see here where this group is working, it covers the water so completely that one Trappa will push the other Trappa up like they're trying to kill each other to reach the light. And it changes the oxygen in the water. It blocks all the light. So submerged aquatic vegetation, you know, all those restorations we're doing in the bay with the submerged aquatic vegetation. Well, this will do quite well in the shallow waters of the bay, and it will kill the sap. So we're fighting like crazy. If you would like to see it for yourself, we're about to have a series of volunteer events, because between 2021 and 2022, we got to see the invasion curve in action. Up until 2022, this had moved rather slowly from one pond to another, mostly in Fairfax County, Virginia. So like I said, just a few ponds in a small area, and all of a sudden in 2022, it showed up all the way on the Virginia-North Carolina line, not even in the Chesapeake Bay watershed anymore. And it crossed the Potomac somehow, we don't know how. And there are 3 infested ponds in Greenbelt, Maryland now, all in the Anacostia watershed. So I know you guys know the Sligo Creek is part of the Anacostia watershed. So that means it's in your watershed now. This would be a great year for you when you go out for a walk to walk around that pond. You know, a lot of parks have like a pond in them that you can bike around or walk around. Just look at the water surface periodically and see if there's trappa in it. That would be fantastic. So that's 4 species, and that's the distribution map in our service area, which shows most of the occurrences except for the ones that are now down at the very southern end of Virginia, which is outside our service area, which is too bad. So again, we're trying to move detection and public awareness to the left so that there's less ecological damage, so it costs less money to do or less physical labor to do. Now, I wanted to mention quickly what happens if you don't deal with it at this end of the curve is that eventually, as you see the right-hand side of the curve in the red zone, what happens is eventually the rate of increase will slow off. There will be an equilibrium. That equilibrium is achieved when the invader has occupied all of the suitable habitat. So that's English ivy, right? We gotta stop working over here at the red end of the curve, but there is some hope at the red end of the curve, and that's biocontrols. And I know some of you are very interested in the topic of biocontrols. So I just wanted to say that's on the invasion curve too. It's on the other end of the invasion curve from early detection and rapid response. So that is it. I know even just for 4 species, that was a lot of information. We have a listserv, and we use that listserv to just send you information about things that are good to look for at that time of year. So if you join the listserv, you're going to get like 12, 24 emails a year with that kind of information, which this weed warrior from Arlington is displaying so nicely for us. But also you are welcome to post to the listserv anything that has to do with early detection and rapid response. If you want me to add you to the listserv, please email me at sara.tangren@dc.gov and put listserv in the subject line. So that would be that. And I think that's the last slide. Yeah. So I'll stop sharing unless anyone needs to see a slide.
Okay, well, I'll see if I can then. So we're going to open it up for questions. I'm going to start with the first one because it's the one I had before you started, Sara. And that was, I've been seeing, say, Akebia chocolate vine, and I'm like, we can't outpull this. I mean, I've never seen anything like this before. And so I'm curious, you said that you contact the land managers and then they decide with whatever resources they have. And I mean, clearly you were just showing us one where the group has gotten together to try to do this, on some, but others, I mean, we can just report, but we're also, as the weed warriors, we're also, pulling and cutting. And it's a little, it's beyond daunting on some of them. You're like, no, we can't outpull kudzu, and you're like, well, do we just not do it? I mean, anyway, so
Yeah, right.
So you showed us a few that there are people that are, that they're taking action on. Are those just the very few? Is that the handful that people are doing?
So there are 89 species that we are tracking and corresponding about right now, which is, quite frankly, more than I can handle by myself. and really do it justice, really be tracking the incoming reports and corresponding with the land managers. It's also a bit too much for the land managers, right? Because they had full-time jobs before I started doing this. So, and then I'm just like, oh, look, there's a Kievia popping up over here. So we need more resources to do this. And I think the weed warriors are feeling that too. In the case of Akebia specifically, I know that one is hard to control even with chemicals. But at least with chemicals, you can cut the vines and treat the stumps. And unfortunately, the National Park Service is rather expert at this because there's a large infestation down along the Potomac River. It's a couple of acres. And they have been battling it for years. It's really bad. So yes, we're going to have to keep battling that. We're going to have to get better at methods. We really do need to direct some funding to it. And I think these maps, and Walter, if you guys want a map of anything, let me know. I will get you the map. But I think these maps should maybe appear in front of some people who make financial decisions. I've also just heard a speaker from Arlington, and I thought this was amazing. I can get the details on this if you're interested, but there's some sort of a community grant program that is like a civic association grant program. And the purpose of it is for communities to be able to get a few $1,000s at a time to improve some public amenity like a playground or something. Well, 10, 15 years ago, the citizens in a little watershed called Lubber Run in Arlington said, hey, let's use the Civic Association grant program and apply to clean up our stream valley. Because it was totally overrun. Apparently it was as bad as it can get. And they didn't even know when they got the invasives out of it, if there would be any native plants underneath it. It was horrible to hear them tell this story. And they got it. They got the award for the Civic Association grant. And every year for the last 10 to 15 years, they are spending $4,000 a year on average to have contractors come back and do follow-up work. And they also have weed warriors. So they can direct the things that really would be ideal for contractors, like a big infestation of Akebia. Maybe that's for contractors. I'm not that familiar with that particular species. I would say a bad and there are bad infestations of Italian arum, not like talking about scattered individual plants, but like actually dense colonies that go on for acres. I would say that's a really good candidate for chemical treatment, and it's spot treatment. It's still spot treatment. It's not a lot of chemical, but just trying to remove some of these things manually is a lot. So grants, talk to your representatives. Please let me know if you want maps to support your cause. Does anyone else have any ideas of like things that we can do in these situations?
So if people would raise their hand, and then anybody else, I can sort of scroll through and look for people. I know there's so many weed warriors who are so excited about what we can do.
Walter, while you're doing that, again, prevention and information sharing. You know, we could get together and put an article in the Tacoma Park newsletter about the Akebia situation. And then residents in Tacoma Park would read that article and see, like, Walter, if you said the thing that you just said about how hard it is to control this thing manually, and we had that printed in the newsletter with like some photographs of Akebia, that would be fantastic.
Okay, well, great. Okay, so I see Ross. So Ross, you want to go ahead?
Yeah, and sorry, this isn't an idea, it's just a clarifying question. Going back to the 89 species, are they all at one general point on your invasion curve, or are they spread across the curve?
Hi, Ross.
Hi.
Yeah, so they are spread across the early side of the invasion curve, or at least that's what I like to tell myself. I don't like to see them get, but yeah, we are seeing some more rapid increase. The invasion curve is, of course, a simplification, and it's a tool for thinking about the situation. And after a species is completely and thoroughly invaded an area and reached the far right-hand side of the invasion curve, if we were collecting data, we could map it. We could plot it, excuse me, and actually make the curve. And that has been done. So for example, English ivy is ready to have its curve made. It's pretty close to used up all that available habitat, but it would also be species specific, and we don't know in advance how quickly a species. So like, I don't have years marked on the x-axis because it's dramatically different for different species. Yeah. So in my mind, all the species I showed you tonight are toward the left side of the curve in some way or other. For example, that nasty grass has already thoroughly invaded our West Coast and the Southwest United States. So over there, it's at the far right, but here on the East Coast, it's really big news. So I don't know.
And just to follow up, if I may, so the Weed Warrior menu, the list of species that we typically focus on, I suspect is largely on the right hand of the curve.
That's right.
And so there's a tension here, which, and I mean, that's been touched on already a little bit tonight, but if trees are being pulled down by English ivy, well, we don't want that to happen, but we also know we're not going to control ivy. And at the same time, we want to look for bittercress or narrow leaf bittercress, which has shown up in our watershed, and we want to try to stamp that out. But so we have to divide our time in the best possible way to be effective at saving trees, but also preventing new invaders.
Exactly. I like the way you put that. There is a tension there, right? So we want to get the English ivy off of the trees, and we want to get it off of the forest floor too, right? The trees come first, but hey, what about all of our wildflowers and ferns, right? So this is a phenomenal amount of work. The last thing we want to do is invest all of that time and caring and energy and money to do that, just to have the next vine, which would be Akebia, come in and take its place. So I feel like there's this tension, but I also kind of feel like there's an imperative to do both things, which brings us back to Walter's question: where are the resources? We have to have resources.
Okay, other questions? I just have an observation, and that was, Sarah, when you took us for this walk and were taking pictures, of which you showed in your slides that I had not thought of before, was putting your hand as the background. I'm always taking green on green, and it's like, can you see the plant? So that was incredibly helpful, and I hope people saw that, is to use your hand as a background. It both gives some size, but also a non-green background to illuminate these different things. So that was incredibly helpful.
Oh, good. Yeah, you'll notice when I do my presentations, a lot of the pictures have a hand in them.
Yeah. So other questions? Anybody want to raise a hand? And I'm hoping that Sarah will agree to give some other walks. It was very helpful for me to go through. And I think, as a weed warrior that's out there a fair amount, to just say, okay, this time we're not cutting weeds. We're just going to go for a walk to see what's out there. It's a different thing, but yeah, it's very helpful. to see. And in fact, we came across something too, as a viburnum that was just growing by, I guess it was growing by runner. I had never seen that. And that was just between near Wayne Avenue. And I was like, wow. Okay, so Ross, now, okay, Ross, you're back.
All right. Yeah, well, I'm back, and this is just to further the discussion. Again, I don't have ideas here, but questions. So back to the resource issue then, and maybe Corinne, I mean, she's one person on the call that I know has local government experience, and of course, Sarah, you do too, and others may weigh in. So my question is, when it comes to trying to gather resources, are we more likely to be successful when we bring up the case of the new invader versus the case of the more established invader, like the English ivy or porcelainberry, that the politicians and the decision makers can see more readily and might see the threat from those things more readily than they would see from the new invader? Thanks.
I think that was a question, Sarah.
I think Sarah's waiting for me to answer, but I'm gonna let Sarah's the PhD and the speaker, so I'm gonna let Sarah answer first, and then I can answer as well, but I'll give her the chance to answer first.
Yeah, I'm also not really quite representing a government agency. I'm kind of representing a nonprofit. It's a little squishy what I represent. But so it might be a little easier for me to speak freely. I would present the case that the trees are dying. The trees are dying, the CO2, all of that. And then I would say, it's going to cost us X thousands of dollars to clean up this acre. And for an extra $10, we can prevent it from happening again. Because otherwise you just wind up where you started, right? The other thing I think might be interesting information to you. So the National Capital Prism right now serves DC and each adjacent county. And the counties of Fairfax and Arlington have, it's a little different, and I'm going to try and speak quickly. They have an invasive plant manager. They have an invasive plant volunteer coordinator. They have an assistant to the volunteer coordinator. They have a person who does what I do, only for the county. And one of them has a full-time botanist, which if I had access to a full-time botanist, I would not have spent the last 2 days trying to key out that grass. So, which is actually pretty good, but not as good as a botanist. So Arlington and Fairfax are leading, they're showing us what can be done when the county council can be convinced to dedicate those resources. They know how to make that argument. They know what worked. So I would ask them, Ross, I would ask them your question. I have not asked them your question, but I can hook you up with them if you want to talk with them. And Prince George's County and DC have no invasive plant manager, no weed warrior program, no botanist, no bupkis, nothing. And so how is that going to work for Montgomery, Fairfax, and Arlington if they have no program? Not good.
I have something optimistic to add to that. Because that was a real downer. No.
I'm sorry.
It's okay, Sarah. It's true. It's totally the truth. So for those of you who don't know me, I think Laura, I saw your note come through wondering, she was asking Sarah if Sarah coordinates with the MoCo Weed Warriors program, and yes, Sarah and I coordinate really well. So for those of you who don't know me, I'm Corinne. I manage the Weed Warrior program here in MoCo. I've been here for about 4 years. So a really optimistic thing, and similar to what Sarah mentioned, is saving the trees, and how we're kind of trying to brand the Weed Warrior program, right, as save the trees and dealing with save the big trees that we have. They're sucking in the carbon, all that kind of stuff. A really positive thing that came out of the MoCo budget was that our budget passed for parks. So what we're doing now is evaluating some things in our vegetation and natural resources, and a hope, as long as we can get all of our numbers and all of our ducks in a row, our hope is that we will actually be hiring somebody who is herbicide certified. We already have one herbicide certified. It's not me. We already have an herbicide certified person on our 4-person vegetation management team, but hiring at least another one, and something that I've been pushing for, that I know I've spoken to a lot of you on the call about, is having that person actually have some dedicated percentage of their time. This would be a full-time staff member to actually work with me and dedicated weed warriors on sections that they're doing a lot of work on, to get some professional management following up on your work. So that is a really, yay, I'm stoked. I mean, I'm hoping everything goes through, but the budget actually looked a lot better than, I wasn't as optimistic as I should have been probably. But so you all, and something else to point out is this came down from the director's office. Nat Resources had, I think, the biggest, if not one of the biggest, like positive input towards the budget. So thinking of Nat Resources professionals, Nat Resources volunteers, which are all of you in the Weed Warrior program, all of you who wrote to County Council, all of you who called County Council, all of you who actually, I don't know if any of you did, but we had some Weed Warriors that actually went on video testimony for the Nat Resources budget. And it all went through really nicely, and the director's office noticed. So I congratulate you on that, and hopefully we can get some more work done moving forward. And I am going to be hiring another assistant as well. So hopefully we can get close to that Fairfax number, and I'll have some help as well.
Yep. We're sneaking up on you, Fairfax. I'm from Montgomery County, for those of you who don't know, and I am one of Corinne's adorable little weed warriors.
She is, as is Sarah's husband.
Yep.
So we appreciate all of you. And I hear what Walter and Ross are saying, and it's a frustrating, I mean, it's part of my training. Sarah went through it. One of the things I say is this is one of the most exciting volunteer jobs there is, but it can also be one of the most demoralizing and the most upsetting and the most gut-wrenching volunteer jobs, right? When you feel like you're cutting all the ivy, and oh crud, now Acacia is in there, right? So yeah.
Right.
But yes, Laura, to answer your question, the Montgomery Parks Weed Warrior program does work closely with Sarah, and we try to work as closely as possible with Prism. And we sent one of our team members, there's only 4 of us, one of our team members got to go to their training and that kind of stuff. So
Yeah, Bob was there. That was so cool.
Bob is our certified herbicide applicator.
And so for the rest of us, you just want us to be out there using our cameras on anything we don't recognize.
Exactly. If you see it and you don't know what it is, it's worth photographing. Even if it's not EDRR, you're going to learn something. The community is going to come in and suggest an ID. And if it turns out to be one of those 89 species, then it will show up in my process. So yeah, when you see something you don't recognize, or if you see something you do recognize and you know we're looking for it, like Italian arum, for example, and the incised fumort, you know what? Let's keep incised fumort out of the Sligo Creek Valley. As far as we can tell, it's not there. This thing is a bad, bad thing. It's a tiny little flower. And this year we saw multiple instances of where it was killing bluebell populations. Just almost like you had sprayed herbicide on the bluebells. And all of a sudden fumort showed up. It's horrible. And we don't have it. This is our opportunity to keep not having it.
And another answer to that question, Ross, as far as taking pictures too, we are in the process. I worked really closely with our GIS team and came up with an actual app that Weed Warrior volunteers can be trained on. Right now, it's just in the initial beta testing stage, but our GIS developers were excited to create it with us. And it includes the exact fields that we have in our vegetation management unit layers for GIS. So eventually, and I did actually tell Ryan Carlton, our vegetation ecologist, that I would like to use the Friends of Sligo Creek Weed Warriors as guinea pigs. So I'm sorry in advance, but I keep seeing all your emails back and forth about monitoring, and I think you would be perfect guinea pigs to help us. So we're gonna at some point when this app is ready, train you all how to use it, but it's going to include fields, and once you fill in the fields that match our GIS layers, it will automatically go into our vegetation management GIS layers and pop up in there so that we can see where all the different plants are and sort by them and all that kind of fun stuff. And it'll include things like, is there one plant, or is the density so high that it could fill an entire football field, kind of questions. So those are all things we'll train you on how to use. And that's going to help us specifically in Montgomery parks. So you could post something in there as well as iNaturalist, which is for what Sarah's doing is for the whole PRISM community. This would be strictly for Montgomery Parkland, but just something to keep in mind that we've got moving too. Just in case you wanted to do more on your phone while you're in the middle of the woods.
Yeah, right. You need that because you're weed warriors and you're not just observing the thing. You're probably interacting with it. You're probably managing it. And iNaturalist will not record that for you. It doesn't have that capacity.
Yep. And your fields will have something like, how much did you remove while you were out there too? So you don't have to just take a picture of it. If we can ID it for you and help you make sure you're 100% IDing it correctly, then Sarah's the good resource. Sarah's who I use as my resource to tell me what the best way is for the weed warriors to handle something. Should they be pulling it out by the roots? Is that going to make it worse if they cut it? That kind of thing. And Sarah's a great resource for that. So, because it's all research on these NNIs that I haven't done research on because they're so new. So,
yeah. Some of them are so new, there's no information.
Yeah, we've run into that, right, Sarah? Yeah, we were like, I don't know.
I don't know. What do you want to do?
I don't know. Pull it, see what happens. So, yeah, all good things.
Wow, this has been great. Sarah, thank you so much.
Thank you,
And
Laura.
Corinne leaving on a positive note. One of the few that's like, anyway, so thank you all. We had about 30 people that joined in and this is recorded. So after Ed cleans it up to remove me, it should be, ready to go. I don't know the time frame, but he's usually a fast worker. So again, thank you all for
Wait,
participating.
Walter, can I
Oh.
interrupt you for 1 second?
Sure,
I'm sorry.
sure.
While I was talking, a bunch of questions popped into your chat and I don't want them to feel left out.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I was like, okay.
Do you want me to read them to you if you have something else open? Would that be helpful?
Well, if you want, you're very fat and you probably have more. No,
I have it open.
Yeah, sure.
So
Why don't you?
Can you share a link? I think this is the next one. There's a whole lot of discussion about the autumn fern and Christmas fern and all this fun stuff. And then can you share a link to the project in iNaturalist? Maybe we could do that as a follow-up. I put your email in there already in the chat, Sarah, but maybe because it says there's a lot of PRISM projects and I'm having trouble finding the right one.
Yes, you're right. I've got like 60.
There are.
And you want to find the main one. I will share the link and it can go out with the recording.
I like Kathy's note. The main thing I've learned is the power of fighting the non-native invasives with assertive natives. And that's something fun that we're trying to do with the Weed Warriors too, is to get some plants from Pope Farm for areas that have done a good job clearing the non-native invasives. I've been getting folks plants from Pope Farm to plant in their place. And yeah, I agree, especially for your own backyard and that kind of thing. Jim, what's your question? What species are on the list? Which list?
The invasive list of PRISM.
They're all 84?
Yeah. Is there a place we can find those?
Yeah, I'm putting the link in the chat right now.
Oh, okay, very good.
That's it, my friend. Those are all your questions. I just didn't want, yeah, it looks like you answered them all.
All right. Well, I don't want to chase anybody out, but I want to respect everybody's time at the same time. So again, thank you all for joining us, and there'll be a recording of this, share it widely. So, and then we'll all be in touch. Sarah, again, we hope to have you do some walks with us And maybe, you know, an invasives happy hour. I don't know, walk through the woods. Well, wait, we'll discuss that offline. Anyway,
I like that.
Yeah,
Don't
yeah.
laugh. The Kensington Weed Warriors do that.
okay,
All right.
there you
I
go.
love
We just have to
these.
catch up. All righty. Well, thank you all,
Thank you,
and
Sarah.
have a good evening.